Hello, everyone, and welcome to Work Smarter, Not Harder with Advanced Mainframe Analytics, the third of four panel discussions we're having as part of the Information Week Virtual Summit Mission Essentials for the Application Economy, which is being broadcast by UBM and sponsored by CA Technologies. I'm Lenny Liebman of Information Week, and I have the good fortune of being your host throughout today's special event. And in case you're just joining us, I'm going to briefly explain how your interface to this event works. So first of all, the slides will advance for you automatically throughout the event. You can also download a copy of, I think we have one slide for this presentation, by clicking below the media player. By the way, though, we recommend that you please disable your pop-up blockers so you can use all the interactive features of the interface. Especially when it comes to interaction, you can submit questions at any time by typing them into the Q&A window. Don't wait until we get to the Q&A portion of our program to send your questions in. If you hear anything at any time that any of our speakers say and you want them to elaborate or you want to challenge their assertion, please feel free to go ahead and do so. Finally, if you experience any technical problems, just type your issue into that Q&A text area as well, and we'll be happy to provide you with some one-on-one assistance. So now on to the panel, Work Smarter, Not Harder with Advanced Mainframe Analytics. We've got three really smart, experienced subject matter experts with us to discuss challenges and solutions in the operations space today. So first I'm going to introduce to you Rajan Patel, who is Senior Vice President and Infrastructure Integration Head for Distributed Enterprise Systems at Citibank. Rajan joined Citi in 2002 and has led his current group since 2011. And in his role, he manages a team of SMEs, both in distributed and enterprise environments, with a focus on job scheduling especially. We also have with us Seth Miller, who is Director of Mainframe Resource Planning, Automation, and Performance Testing for AIG. He has a wealth of experience in managing mainframe environments that have to meet extremely demanding requirements of large global enterprises operating around the clock with do-or-die SLAs, as I'm sure many of you deal with too. And finally, joining us is Desikan Madhavanur, Senior Vice President for CA Technologies of IT Orchestration Automation Business Unit. Now there, Desikan leads an organization that's really focused on pioneering innovative infrastructure management, monitoring, automation solutions that enable organizations like yours to cut costs, reduce risk, and also better achieve their strategic and tactical business objectives. So gentlemen, I'm looking forward to our talk. And I think maybe we can start off, Rajan, you can talk a little bit about your environment, what you do, just so that we sort of understand something besides the title that I gave everyone.
Absolutely. So thank you to be part of this panel discussion with Jessica, Seth, and Lenny. Thanks for the opportunity. So yes, so just to give you background, basically I do manage distributed open systems and enterprise mainframe scheduling infrastructure for Citibank. Primarily, mostly on a level 3 support, and we take care of all the infrastructure for running all the scheduling products, plus manage all the products, maintenance, upgrades. We do also build up a lot of automation tool set that come along with scheduling products. And the scale and scope, it's kind of, we are processing close to 45 million jobs executions per month. So that's our environment what we run, kind of. On
45 million?
Yes. And so that's both including distributed and the enterprise side. So there's a constant things which are coming up in terms of maintaining the infrastructure and level 3 support, working with all the vendors with Desikan's team, and so that's where we are. And we do growth, so it's a constant moving environment, and that's who I am.
So, great. Well, that's good to know, I think, so that when you give us the rest of the answers to the questions, our attendees are going to know that you're dealing with a pretty serious environment. Seth, I'm going to ask you, too, to give us some idea of what kind of organization you're in and what you're doing.
So I manage all of AIG's mainframe capacity and performance management. So in that role, I've been there about 25 years, and we've seen the environment grow massively over that time. And it's my responsibility to make sure we stay ahead of the growth curve, stay ahead of the forecasts, and stay ahead of the demand curve so that we're aware and we're ready to position and be agile in the environment. So that's really where my main, that's where the automation ties, and also we're a big ops NVS shop also. So we tie automation and planning together, and we try to achieve good results.
Yeah, that's good. Again, it's good for everybody to kind of know what kind of stuff you do, because that'll be the context. So, Rajan, you've described what your job entails. Tell me what some of the pressures and challenges that you particularly and personally are facing in your, both or in the organization as a whole and also you as somebody who's leading it, what kind of pressures you face?
So we are kind of currently on the maturing in our organization. So over the years, Citibank actually was doing we had a lot of acquisitions and mergers. So that came along with every time there was a merger or an acquisition, that came along with the different products and tool sets. So we had several scheduling products what we used to support, and so we had to look at different processes, how we can do a better job than what we have, how can we get into a common scheduling platform. And so over the years we have been doing this consolidation and kind of moving to a strategic scheduling products. And it takes, there's a change. So everybody, when you go back to the business or somebody saying, okay, you need to make a change here, there's a lot of negotiation that takes place and, bringing value of what we do and so on. So we have been successful in doing what we have over the years. We have reached to our goals to run to a common platform and building up the processes. So this is one of the biggest challenge I see here. How do we get to a next level? How do we standardize? How can we do better job in terms of operation models and so on? And so that's because of the challenge. And how to predict, right? Saying what can we predict in coming months and so on. So this is one of the things. Yeah.
And you're raising you raised one issue that I think is really important. Is a lot of times in our previous panels we've spoken primarily in terms of sort of organic workload growth, driven by maybe more use of mobile apps hitting the mainframe, or maybe web services or whatever. But one of the things that you're coping with is also the mergers and acquisitions part of the business can also be kind of disruptive to your tool set.
Absolutely. Luckily, in past few years, we have been slowed down, but this is going on for many years.
Right.
But it is. There's always a demand for doing better than more with less. And how do we do a better job than what we are doing currently? So we always have to keep up with the technology, how to make it simplified. Even from the management perspective, I cannot, having different tool set. There's always so many things coming up, and how do I streamline? So these are all the questions comes up.
Yeah. Seth, I'm going to ask you the same thing, both your organization and you personally. What are the particular pressures or challenges that you're feeling as we're kind of in the middle of 2016 here, and objectives that you have to achieve?
Well, we've got continuous growth going on, and we really don't want to scale the people side of it too much. So we're really looking for opportunities where we can have the system tell us more and monitor more in the environment and help us adapt and actually grow more securely and stably moving forward. So we've got a big growth going on into cloud environments and things like this at work. We've got a lot of movement towards mobile computing, a lot of movement towards, years ago, insurance was primarily back-end stuff. Now it's all electronic, and you can't run without your systems being up and available. So that's where the pressures come from, is meeting that uptime, meeting that performance requirements with changing workloads and underlying growth and business growth. So really our challenges are how do we get the system to talk to us over time and tell us what's changing in the environment rather than us having to chase information around. It scares me that I have a person looking at a report trying to see a trend when I think the machine should be talking to us about these sort of things and giving us that. So that's where I see that the challenges that we're facing and where I think there's a lot of opportunity. For us
and you're talking about in particular, again, that the growth is being driven by, for example, customer-facing mobile, and there's just the digital activity it drives on the back end.
And the social networking side of it, there's a tremendous influx of data and a tremendous mining of this data now that's going on in the environment that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of as that grows and as that changes over time, and have an effective way of monitoring things that are continually changing. And that's where I see a lot of opportunity in autonomics and things like that, and analytics. Leveraging our historic information to give us information what to expect in the future.
So Jessica, I'm going to ask you too, although you're obviously on the vendor side, before we talk about sort of what operational analytics can do for us, what you're seeing out there across many organizations as being some of the top pressures and challenges that our attendees who are some sort of ops managers are facing.
Absolutely. First, Seth and Rajan, thanks a lot for joining us in this panel. There are 2 or 3 major trends that we're beginning to see with our customer base. One of the things we've talked about a lot is mainframe economics. Everybody goes to how do I get more out of my infrastructure investment? Critical. But another thing that's becoming more and more prominent is the cost of disruptions. The cost of disruptions today given of the 24/7 agile environment, is far greater than just the infrastructure cost. So the need to predict and get ahead of these issues before they happen and avoid the cost that it's going to bring is becoming very critical. So that's
now, when you say the cost of disruption, you mean the cost to the organization of something going wrong with an app? Or
well, let me give you a quick example, right? In a simple case, if there are some specific jobs that need to run on a platform and get done at a particular point of time, if you don't make that window, you could have a long-running impact of everything that is to follow.
Okay.
In addition to that, you have direct penalties associated with missing deadlines, especially if it's something government-regulated. There are problems there as well. And the other thing, which is even more critical, and I'll come back to the second point we see, which is the complexity of resolving issues is far greater today.
Yes.
Like Seth was mentioning, a lot of transactions today start at the mobile, end at the mainframe, multiple layers of databases, applications in the middle. Something goes wrong, you can't look at a chart and find out what went wrong, right? So the ability to predict where issues are beginning to appear and resolve them before they manifest themselves as a complicated issue is super critical. So that would be the top two major concerns, complexity and how do we manage the cost of not just the infrastructure, but avoiding the cost of disruption. These are two major things that are coming up.
And as organizations, I think you were saying the insurance business and banking are so pervasively digital that the implications and the dominoes that can fall are pretty serious.
Sure.
So we talked about the challenges and context. Now let's go ahead and transition to what we think analytics is going to do for us. So again, we'll just go down the line. What's your sense of what operational analytics brings to the table for IT?
So basically, I just want to touch base what Desikan was saying. So we are extremely very sensitive in terms of meeting our SLAs and making sure there's no disruptions in the business in batch processing. So we are always looking for trends, right, in terms of absorbing any new workload or bringing new business to our organization. By the way, we grow like constantly, I would say close to 20% per year. So it's always expanding. We're always on the expansion mode. So we are looking at all this tool set. How are we doing on the issues? How much time it takes to resolve an issue? How much faster we can clean up the issues or support the issues? So this is where we are currently, kind of looking at all this operational analytics to predict and see how can we do better job, what are the bottlenecks, and what can we do proactively before the issues become more problematic. So this is one of the key focus, what we have to do it, kind of in terms of making sure everything runs smoothly and there's no issues. Yeah.
And Seth, you already hinted at what you're looking at analytics to do, but talk a little bit more about how you think it's potentially going to help you guys.
My focus is really on real-time analytics.
Right.
So as the system's running, can I leverage the historic data, what norms are occurring, and where my normal, because the first question we're always asked in a problem is, well, what's changed? What happened today? Why is today different than some other day? And having a tool in the background able to ingest all of our data real time and tell me what's deviating, that's really the key to what I'm looking for in our environment, to let us scale effectively and to have that information delivered to us autonomously from a system that runs independently in the back end. That to me is where the real value is going to lie in our future, because that lets me spot anomalies during hours where I don't have constraints. During the wee hours of the morning, I may have an application that I can spot running, but if I have a CPU threshold that's set very high to say, oh, only alert me when it's very high, I'm not going to see a variance when the CPU is low. But I may be able to spot that an application release went bad over the weekend, or maybe there's something wrong because in my overseas unit or my overseas applications, I can see a slight rise in resource usage. Well, a 20% rise in the middle of the night is tolerable. 20% rise in the middle of my daytime is not. So if I can address things ahead of time, I can simplify things. And again, by having the system give me information, I don't have to have somebody running reports. I don't have to have somebody constantly looking through screens of data.
Right.
The system's going to tell me paging is high, or memory is low, or CPU is high here, or transaction rates are high here. That's where I think the goal. That's where I think the real solution lies for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned two things I want to ask you about. One is you mentioned this notion that you can watch activity in another time zone to maybe get a clue about things before they hit here. So is that sort of a best practice that you're thinking about, which is sort of with follow the sun management, that you'll be able to get some early warning about things?
That's what we're hoping for, right? You know, we get the alert in the middle of the night, something's changed here, and the more important is I can get the historic aspect of it. I can tell you, this is where you are now, this is where you were yesterday, this is where you were last week at this time. Something's changed. If I can raise that awareness early and avoid an SLA or avoid that long-running cycle or avoid that problem later on, that's worth its weight in gold to us. I mean, that's the holy grail for us, really.
So then the other question I want to ask, when you talk about what's changed, is it looking for just from an infrastructure point of view, seeing when events have happened, like utilization of CPU or some I/O on storage, or are you also looking for events that might also impact the business, like the rollout of a new mobile app feature and or even a marketing campaign can theoretically affect?
And the ability to associate external business relationships through this vast set of historic data. We're already collecting so much data on the mainframe. That's the point I come back to, is we already have this rich data source. I can merge business data with it. I can merge application releases and say, these are the pieces that changed when a new application went out. Did you know your web server was going to get busy when you released this application? Did you know they were going to... These are all things you can pull out afterwards by doing correlation analysis through statistics and through a big data platform that we're hoping all of this is leading towards in the future, because that's where I think the holy grail is on allowing us to have a minimum number of staff watching an ever-growing environment behind it, right? I don't need to have a lot of people watching a lot of panes of glass if the machine is doing it for me. And that's where I think there's a lot of value.
And it's not just growing in terms of sort of total Mr. Volume. There's more pieces, right? There's more events because we're just doing all this stuff. So the pure number of events or things that happen is...
And the number of components. Staggering. I mean, you used to have a network, the terminal, the mainframe back up. Now we've got servers and everything related in there. If you can have the entire ecosystem monitored and mapped, I mean, there's a lot of tools that are coming out now that'll do this. That's going to really give us the ability to, from a high level, to have an application overlay, a business overlay over all this data, and be able to say, this is where our problem is, this is what's affecting us, and be able to see it before it happens. You know, and the bigger thing to me is most tools that I see now have static thresholds. We need to be able to say something in real time. You know, it doesn't do me any good to say what the traffic is at midnight. I need to know what's it normally at midnight, and is it higher at midnight or is it lower at midnight, not just that it's below my arbitrary.
And let's get back to that about what the actual heuristics are. Just kind of, I want to ask you a slightly different question, because we're using this term operational analytics. Maybe we need to take a moment and you could kind of define it for us. Like, what is it that we're talking about?
So the way we talk to our customers about operational analytics is on two dimensions. One in more predictable batch flows, another one in real-time analytic flows. And both of these are absolutely critical, right? So we have to have a platform that can overlay real-time traffic on top of batch traffic and see where we are, right? And I'm going to hit something that Seth brought up, which is anomaly detection. That is the stepping stone for real operational analytics. The idea there is, if we can look at large data sets, including multiple endpoints like Internet of Things that introduces a whole range of endpoints, we have never been able to study data of that size in near real time to actually make actionable decisions. The idea of this particular category of capabilities is, can I take a large data set, take the historical data, extract the trends, or overlay the real-time events on top of those trends, and find out where the anomalies are happening. So that's step one. That itself is a huge benefit if we can provide that. It's like looking for the needle in the haystack rather than looking at reports. You look at the 5 things that you really have to look at. The second step that operational analytics really leads us into is prioritization. And that, you cannot do it just by looking at the event. You got to know how does it correlate to a business event or a business impact. So that is the topology that was brought up as well, is how do these events or transactions relate to a larger marketing campaign, a Black Friday event, right? Those kinds of things. So the ability to correlate that and in many cases dollarize the impact of the transaction is becoming the next major trend. The third thing, the holy grail when we are, when we're all done with doing this kind of work, is how can I do real-time decisioning using automation? If I have seen user behavior and how these things get resolved, can 80% of that be automated, right? Now that would reduce the amount of spreadsheet crunching that goes on in shops to something that focuses purely on key new events that we have never seen before. That's where we want to get to. That's the roadmap typically of operational analytics.
So when you talk about context of events, so one of the questions that I would have is, what is the origin of the intelligence within a system to recognize, for example, there's some peaks that you're expecting because of they happen every end of quarter. Right. There's some peaks that you're always expected, like you said, time of day.
Right.
There's some kind, but this periodicity for different fluctuations varies so much across different types of applications. Some of them, again, are once a year, some of them are once a quarter, some of them are once a week. How does operational analytics sort of suss out what an anomaly really is versus variability that's sort of within a norm for some period? Yeah.
See, that's the holy game. That's what we've been working with our customers on. So there are multiple levels of learning that goes in. The standard learning is the ability to correlate the data against historical patterns, time of day, day of week, day in the quarter, seasonality. So that's very critical. The other thing that becomes critical, which sometimes people overlook, is the correlation between events. If this happens, typically it's followed by that. If a spike in X happens, a spike in Y usually follows. Sometimes you miss that. So the kind of learning algorithms that we are testing with our customers, and Seth's seen some, Rajan's seen some, is how can we paint a allowable allowance around the events, and how can we detect, even if it's within your static threshold, how can we detect that the actual event is going outside that window.
So when you say, for example, that we discover if you see this, that when you have a spike in X, it's usually followed by a spike in Y, do we also use that not only to cite an anomalous event, but to say the spike in Y may be symptomatic of the spike of X? So we look at correlation as also perhaps suggesting causality?
Causality, absolutely. That's the next step, right? Not all correlations are causal, right? So the idea is to determine that. And that comes with more data and more learning and with user behavior. When we present three options as to these are the three things we think are going on, and we predictably see the user say, I figured this is the resolution, this is what we saw it, then the algorithm picks that up, and it gets more intelligent over time. That's the whole premise of intelligent mainframe. Can we get the event from the network, from the system, from storage, from the edge devices? How can we layer them and correlate them and put them against dynamic thresholds? And how can we now project a miss in a critical path flow to know this miss, is it really going to impact business or not? So that's the key thing that we're working on. And, and if you look at any of the infrastructures, whether you look at Splunk in the distributed side, it is the same thing. The algorithms are a little different. It is a little bit more tailor-made. But for any of these infrastructures to be successful, they have to work across all platforms. Because that's how we look at it.
And that's what we're looking for, too. As I said earlier, we're looking for, we have applications that traverse multiple platforms. Eventually, I need to have all those platforms playing in this analytics space in order to make this work properly, I need to know if the web server is a problem, or if the file server is a problem, or if the back-end database is a problem, So, that's where we got to stitch things together in the back end to make sure that it all fits together.
Because the problems often relate to each other. You think you have a mainframe database problem, and what it really is middleware is calling to the database in a way that's...
Or there's a network switch down somewhere that you haven't even correlated, that you don't even know it's involved in your application workflow,
So Rajan, what are you seeing in your environment in terms of both the potential and the actual use of analytics? How is it affecting what you're doing?
So basically, I look at it at two areas. One is on the scheduling product itself. So there's massive data, like, jobs executions are taking place. As I said, the numbers are 45 million job executions per month.
And let me just interrupt you. So you have that many jobs executing, but you also have a lot of statistics from each one of those jobs individually in terms of start and finish and volume, and et cetera.
And we have to trend it, saying what is the trend, how much time it takes for a job to run it, and so on. So based on the critical jobs, we rely on some of the predictive analytic tools, to produce all the data endpoints and show us where are the bottlenecks in the batch. And based on that, it's making us to go more proactive as compared to reactive. So normally the current state was we used to find some alerts and then we used to take some actions based on that. Now with the tool sets what we have on the predictive analysis tools, we could predict if the batch is going to run late and we can take some actions before it becomes more problematic. So that's more on the scheduling application front. Now, from the infrastructure standpoint, of course, capacity planning comes into play. We have to, there's a massive data as well, right? So trying to understand how the systems are running, whether the batch is going to run tonight or maybe on the month end, or the periodic spikes which might be taking place. So there's a massive data which we need to understand, and based on that, we have to predict. Now with the new technologies, we can always expand if required. It's not like going back is to take a big amount of activities to kind of going back and adding some more resources. So these are the key areas of focus. Absolutely, we have to be ready for new workload. We cannot say no, first of all.
Yeah.
It's always any given time, you know, I might have a big workload that I have to support on my infrastructure. So it's always...
You can't tell the bank, no, we don't want people to take pictures of their checks and deposit them with a photo. You're not allowed to make... IT job batch schedules are not allowed to tell marketing what... That's interesting. Okay.
So
I did not know that.
It comes with a responsibility. So basically, we have to make sure we can do well right now with the predictive, predict how we are doing it. Plus, we can absorb new workload. So this is how things, and so we rely on tools.
I have to pick up on something you said earlier about having the tool give you some suggestions, because that's one of the critical problems we're facing right now. You know, with a minimum number of staff, we've got help desks and things like that that are worldwide support desks that are probably able to take corrective actions if a tool was able to present it to them and say, this is what you need to do to correct this, whether it's contact somebody or cancel something. But that is a tremendous step in moving forward too, because again, you know, introducing the use of this data and letting us, you know.
And you know, just to add to Seth's point, you can't rely on a human to look at, to analyze all this data.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to ask you next, Seth, which is, you talked about looking across platforms. Do you also see this as being useful so that your ops teams don't have to have such specialized skills? I'm thinking particularly on the mainframe where we are looking at some skills shortfalls. Do you see this as being part of the solution to your long-term problem?
I see it as allowing us to, you know, work more effectively, right? It allows us to, you know, the tools can bring forward data so that, you know, people don't have to spend much time chasing for data, right? That's one of the biggest challenges in mainframe. We have so much data. It takes a long time to sift through it all. It takes a long time to find what's the red herring, what's not, what's real, what's not real, what's a fake, what's real. So all of that sort of stuff helps optimize all of our operations staff in that sense. So of course it's going to, you know, anything that's going to bring us closer to the data and closer to an answer and closer to identifying what's going on is a step in the right direction, right? So that's the key.
And I want to ask you this, John. It's not only outages and mean time to fix with a finite number of people with finite skills. To some extent, we are having this issue on the mainframe that we really do have to watch our rolling 4-hour peak averages from a cost point of view. And part of planning is not only, I don't want this to spike because response times to my end user's mobile app will fail, but I don't want this to spike because if it starts to go over a certain number, there's going to be a big bill from another company with a 3-letter acronym.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me add to this. A lot of times, the transaction that causes a spike is someone going and checking their account balance.
So it's not revenue positive.
It's not a revenue-generating transaction. Right? So the ability for the platform to look at not just the volume of transactions, but the type of transactions, and to kind of figure out whether to send it through or to put it on a queue is going to be super critical as we go forward. And I can give you an anecdotal example. Worked with a credit card processing company and a gift card processing company, and what they said was they don't expect any peaks on the 25th of December because nobody's shopping, right? And it ties back into your app dev world as well. Lo and behold, there was a mobile app that was released by someone that allowed somebody to check their account balance. So 24th was a peak day, 26th was a peak day, 25 nobody prepared, so they were understaffed and everything. All of a sudden, they get 1 million transactions where people are just going and clicking on the refresh button to get their balance again and again, right? Now, what do? You got to get people out there to fix the problem. So these things happen a lot now. And the ability to understand, is this a value-added transaction? Should this be deferred? Is not something that can be easily seen by just looking at data on a screen. So analytics can be really handy in that as well, in prioritization.
So here's what I'd like to do now, and we are going to come up with some Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to submit, You've got three great experts here. I encourage you, go ahead and get your questions in now. But just before we go to Q&A, we're talking about the Holy Grail. We're talking about some things that are obviously somewhat aspirational. I'm just going to ask you to kind of say, either where are you at now, or what do you see as the starting point? I mean, between current state and this nirvana of, just getting this intelligence that just automatically tells you, so you can just fire everybody and put a 12-year-old in front of a console, right? What's kind of current state that you see?
So right now we were more on the reactive side. So something goes wrong, and then we'll try to fix the problem. So we have the tool sets to do the predictive analysis and predict what are the bottlenecks in the batch and trying to optimize the batch executions and so on. So how do we try to start engaging our clients and the business to start using this tool set? So what we are doing is kind of basically we provide a service. It's kind of like a service level management. And we are working with our business partners and trying to identify which are the critical batch. How much time based on the historical data and all the stuff analysis, right? We can predict this is the average time the batch should be running. And based on that, we put some critical endpoints and also some alerting based on that. And the way it works out, like if something is running slow or something, it will proactively start alerting the appropriate support team members. And we are seeing some progress in terms of we are able to resolve or avoid, I would say, major incidents. Like, anything large volume, what Jessica just brought it up. We could predict some things like based on the historical runs and from the tool set, and then based on that, it's creating a lot of value for our customers right now.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the way you're taking an initial step is instead of trying to boil the ocean and say we're going to apply this across the board, is you're looking for some specific internal customers who have a special need to buy into this approach because they have particular workloads or batches that have either important impact or that are especially difficult to problem solve?
So we are prioritizing based on criticality.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So basically, not everything is critical.
Yeah.
So we have to start with what is the major things which could be disruptive to the business, and based on that, we are taking on the top-down approach. Once we figure out, we set up everything on the critical components, then we'll go to franchise critical applications and go with less and less and so on.
Gotcha. So you're managing scope by focusing on low-hanging fruit first.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the key thing, the reason why we can do it right now, because we have the tool sets.
Yeah.
In previous years, we don't have any tool sets. So we had to do something based on writing some reports, Excel spreadsheets, and all this stuff. So we have come to a point, right, we have the tools which you can do it for us.
And I'm going to give you a chance to talk about those in a minute, but first I want to ask Seth kind of the same question. Talked about the Holy Grail. Somewhere between current state and that state is a set of steps. Where do you see sort of the first steps being, or what are you experiencing, or anything you want to tell our attendees?
From the mainframe perspective, obviously we're looking to get the data out of non-functional storage, offline tape storage, and more into big data. Queryable environment that is scalable and cost-effective for us. So we're looking to get the data into a place where we can get to it and analyze it in an easier manner, right?
Right.
We've typically been dealing with having to run batch jobs in the mainframe to get to some of our historic data. So that's the first challenge.
Yeah.
Then the next step after that is once we have that data, now developing the statistical analysis against it. So we've actually made some inroads on that. We've got some prototypes out there. We've got some pilots that we've run already. What we're really looking for, though, is that there's always a difficulty of having the native access to the data. And we really don't want to get ourselves into writing something that becomes a maintenance problem. So we're looking for where that balance is in the short term, while vendors like we hope Jessica here is going to produce the products that we're really looking for in the long term. Because this is really a commitment to develop an entire platform that you need. And it's not something I don't think an independent company is really going to want to take on their own. You need somebody who's got wider breadth and wider ability to incorporate data and different technologies together in the solution. So, so we're working towards it. I mean, we're chipping away at our own POC on things, but we're also eagerly waiting and participating with CA on hoping this all pans out.
But that's interesting. And sort of one of the first challenges is just getting access to the data that historically you haven't kept there because you didn't have
correct.
any reason to do it, and now you,
And historically, DASD has been, storage is expensive.
Yeah.
And now storage costs have dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
We have this big data environment that is very much lending itself towards use it for this purpose. That's what's really meant, what's ideal for. So,
Sure.
and that's where we're trying to look to see how do we synergize that now and really enhance that within our environment.
And it's a little bit like the shoemaker's children, right? IT has been providing these analytics capabilities to all these marketing groups and product management groups, and it's about time we took advantage ourselves of these capabilities.
Right.
I think you've been very well set up, so we don't want to do a big commercial, but I think it is worthwhile for us to hear something about what are the tools and technologies that are being made available to guys like this so that we can go ahead and use all this data that we already have to solve some problems and keep our peak costs down, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Yeah, so absolutely. So thanks for the plug. Because
yeah, that's great.
My pleasure.
So we have customers already, like Rajan was talking about, adopting certain prediction technologies that we have put out there for our workload automation, regular automation, ops MVS kind of tool sets, where when events happen, you don't look at that event in isolation, but look at it as a part of a critical chain of operations that needs to happen and can predict what can go wrong and go and act on it. So that's in place, and that's very well received, one of our fastest growing areas. Now, where we are working with Seth and other people here to move even past that is mapping real-time performance data as an addition to our current performance management tools. We have our current performance management tools. We have our SysView tools and NetMaster tools, Advantage. So we manage network, processing, and storage, right? Now what we're saying is we're not just going to tell you what it's doing. We're going to tell you what it should be doing. Right. And what is the ranges at which it should be operating. And even if it's not a problem today, we're going to let you know if it's going to be a problem in the past, so you should keep an eye on this. So that's the prototyping that we're doing with customers. I've got tremendous response. It's a big area of need. It addresses many areas of avoiding problems, the cost associated with that, the skill set issue of having to sift through all this data, the agility issue of making sure that you can add more and more applications reliably, right? So we're doing all of that. Right. The next part about it, which we have also started investing in, is learning from user behavior. We know what the issue is. We can now correlate it and tell you what it could be, what if it's a big problem. Now, when we are observing, because all of this data Mainframe provides to us right away, when you go in and make some changes to remediate that issue, we keep track of that. So one of the things that we are looking to introduce, once we get past the initial stage of demonstrating anomalies, is to show past remediation measures that have worked. Okay. Right?
Because you're watching the behavior of the ops staff in their various tools to see what they're done. So you're learning from them.
We're learning from them. And it's very, very critical in today's environment because a lot of times it's a mobile transaction that is slow, and it could be slow anywhere. So it could be a mobile operations person looking at why is my application slow, and they should be able to say, oh, here is where it is slow. It is not slow in the mobile, in the client layer. It's not slow in the application layer. It's a database running on the mainframe that's causing it. And here are two things that I can do, either call the person or maybe even run a routine that usually goes in and cleans up some data there, right?
Yeah.
So this becomes a repeatable model, and having that capability, I think, will take us everywhere. Is anybody there right now among our customer base? A lot of aspirations. I wouldn't say anybody's there right now, but we are actively working on people at the level before that, which is predicting the anomalies, allowing them to prioritize the anomalies as an extension to our existing monitoring and automation tool sets. So it's not a different tool. It's the same tool. You see a problem, but you can also see if it's how does it relate to what's happened in the past and take some remedial action. So that's where we're going. It is a very organic extension to what our customers are already doing. Right? So that's the focus that we've been having. It's been very, very successful. The ones that we already released have got great adoption, and the ones that we're working on, great partnerships. So very excited to be doing this right now. It's a great time for analytics.
Yeah. I do want to give some time for people to submit questions. I have a couple of questions here if you guys are okay taking them. And whoever wants to take these can take these. But one question is, and this may be more for you, Rajan, because you've got that, you're also in the non-mainframe environment, but doesn't adaptive infrastructure sort of inherently reduce the need for fast troubleshooting? In other words, aren't we building so much redundancy and on-demand capacity into our environments that to some extent that's insulating us from the need? I'm going to let you answer it too, Seth. You're shaking your head. But but it's a question we're getting. So why don't we talk about this? Doesn't infrastructure itself sort of inherently, aren't we starting to build the software-defined infrastructure that can respond to this stuff?
Well, it is true to some extent. We always have overcapacity sometime, but things are changing, right? So I can give you an example. I was building up a distributed system infrastructure, and based on what we were using previously, there was a data trend done by the tools, capacity planning tools, and so on. So it came down to the new, for example, like we got like instead of 24 cores engine was given back to four core engines. So this is the data proves us you can live with your current workload with the 4 cores instead of 24, and which is right. And basically, so we adapted that new design, change in design, and we are actually kind of working on the implementation.
Yeah.
So we are confident it's going to work fine. So these are the things which are coming up. So when I go back and realize, okay, I had overcapacity, so kind of previously. So these are the things which we are changing. But now we have the data to prove that.
To prove it.
But it's not always capacity that's your problem.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
More CPU doesn't always make a job run faster.
Exactly.
More, it's not always a function of capacity that's causing a problem, right? So in batch, a late feed causes the job to start late. It could be something as simple as that you need to be aware of and be on top of.
Gotcha.
In a cloud environment, it's not just as, or in a mainframe environment, it's not just as simple as saying there's always more capacity. That's not what always solves a problem. If you've got an application that's got a problem, the earlier you can spot that anomaly in that app, the better chance you have of avoiding the problem in the first place, instead of depending on capacity to elastically scale. That's going to go counter to what we talked about before with cost containment, right? So you really don't want that to be going on and have that viewpoint. That's a wasteful viewpoint, I think.
No, it's a great point. I'm glad you responded to it. Jessica, I'm going to give you a question, then we're out of time. We're probably going to be out of time here. How do you actually cost justify this stuff? In other words, we're talking about we don't want mission critical apps to stop, but at some point to management, you've got to size the investment that it's going to take to do this, and you've got to compare it to something else. Any sense of how you're cost justifying?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it's actually a pretty easy case to make, right?
Very easy.
So in any dimension that you look at, 20% year-over-year growth, and we talked about growth in AIG as well. There is no way you can hire people or build infrastructure to keep up with that growth.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to work with analytics to understand what are the things that can be automated, what are the trends that can be gotten out, and you have to automate that out of the way. Yeah. It's almost a given. I mean, automation is probably the cheapest way to get scale.
Yes.
And analytics is a key underlying pin if you're intelligent automation.
And tools like this are going to expose information to you that you may not be seeing, that you may be able to act on, that is going to allow you to change things.
Yeah.
A lot of people focus on an outlier. This is the longest running transaction. Well, you should focus on the most frequently executing transactions. Squeeze those down and reduce your baseline. Right. So these tools are going to bring forward all of that, those granular metrics that you can't get your hands around right now. It'll let us pick that stuff out from a high level, even at a business or an application level.
It's going to be easy sell.
It's an easy sell. And it hits the business. For the first time, we are working with IT to take the business case to the business and say, do you want this application to run slower? And you're going to release this mobile app. Do you want it to scale to 10,000 people? Do you want to have that confidence? So we have not had any problem in making a business case here. In fact, I would say technology is playing catch up to the business need in this space.
Yeah, and I think you raised an interesting point, which is it's not just the use cases that we know about.
Correct.
We're going to find out there's the unknown unknowns, as someone once said. We won't say who. We really are out of time, though. So I will say, Thank you to our attendees for attending this particular presentation about working smarter, not harder, with advanced mainframe analytics. This has been the third of 4 panel discussions that we're having as part of the Information Week Virtual Summit on Mission Essentials for the Application Economy, which is broadcast by UBM and is being sponsored, thank you, by CA Technologies. Up next, in just 30 minutes, is going to be our last session. It's on mainframe security, and I think it's really going to open your eyes to some technical and operational issues that are worthy of your consideration, especially given the way cybercrime has evolved into a thriving market through totally nefarious market operations. But it's there, and again, the way the mainframe's been opened up to the rest of the world. So please join us then. And of course, I again invite you to make use of all the resources that we've provided as part of this virtual event, including the peer-to-peer chat and the short videos. And by the way, if you know Brian Galuli of Information Week, who's my boss and my editor, he's going to be present in those chats. So I really encourage you to take some time and meet him there, especially if you want to talk about sort of this generational shift, skilling kind of issue that we're facing. I think he's going to be a real interesting person to talk to about that, and he really wants to hear what you have to say. Also, within the next 24 hours, you're going to receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. So that's very helpful if you want to share this content with someone who you report to or some people who report to you. And I do have to mention, as usual, that this presentation is copyright 2016 by UBM. Don't misuse it. Presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Information or CA Technologies, and that our individual speakers today are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. So on behalf of Rajan and Seth and Desikan, thanks again for your time. I'm Lenny Liebman. Please join me in 30 minutes for our next and last panel discussion, a tweet on #MainframeSummit if you'd like, and I'll see you then.